Spring morning. We welcome you all here to celebrate with us and enjoy with us our interfaith explorations. We have a very special guest today with us, who will be introducing to you in a moment. We have some beautiful chanting and music which will accompany our service this morning. And Isla Ross is our musician. She's going to kind of set the mood for us here this morning and give us a little bit of musical interlude in between various places. So we welcome you here, and we hope you have an enjoyable and contemplative time with us. Well, I got to ring the bell here so we know we're starting.
Ambike Jaganmayi Mahamaya Ambike Jaganmayi Mahamaya Ambike Mahamaya Ambike Jaganmayi 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 Mahamaya Ambike Jagannahi Ambike Jagannahi Ambike Jagannahi
Thank you so much, Isla. Oh, talk about contemplative practice. That puts me right in the mood for contemplation. And we have some important activities that we do at the beginning of our services, one of which is to invite in our ancestors. So I've asked Steve to be our emissary with our ancestors this morning. Thank you, Steve.
I'm a good emissary for this because I do have ancestors. One of the things, humanity shares is that we all have ancestors, right? So we have our parents, we have our grandparents, we have our great-great-grandparents, and on and on and on and back it goes. It gets all the way back to hominids, which gave birth to Homo sapiens, and then back for them, the apes, and then going back further and further and further, an unbroken chain all the way back to the first living life form on this planet, millennia ago. And what a gift it is to imagine that unbroken chain of life that comes all the way through to each and every one of you and myself. And this is the greatest gift, the miracle of life that I could imagine. And we give thanks to our ancestors. And if they can be here today, we welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you. And as Thich Nhat Hanh would say, congratulations to all of us for showing up for our appointment with life this morning. You woke up and we were all alive. And that's just a wonderful miracle. We also would like to honor, and always do honor, our first peoples who are of this land and whose land we are now occupying and benefiting from and flourishing upon. So George is going to honor our first peoples this morning.
Thank you, Sally Jo. And yes, it's as always a pleasure and an honor. How do I want to say this? To pay homage to our first peoples. They were the stewards of this land before we got here. And to Steve's point, there's been this long chain of a lot of things, but here's one link here. We took over this land from the Duwamish tribe. This was the unceded property of the Duwamish people. And the Duwamish people were part of the Coast Salish tribes. And I made a few notes here for your edification. The Coast Salish are the indigenous people who lived in the southwest British Columbia and northwest Washington. What is broadly known as the Salish Sea includes Puget Sound, Strait of Georgia, and the mainland, between Victoria and the mainland, the Strait of San Juan de Fuca and Vancouver Island, as well as the Olympic Peninsula. They share a common linguistic and cultural origin. And it surprised me to find out that archaeological evidence indicates that the Coast Salish regions have been inhabited since 9000 BC. And today there's an estimated 56,000 coastal stateless people still living in the US and Canada. And of course, one of these coastal stateless tribes is the Duwamish. There are 29 federally recognized tribes throughout the state of Washington. The Duwamish tribe is not one of them. Although not recognized by the US federal government, the Duwamish remain an organized tribe with approximately 500 enrolled members. The city of Seattle is the only US city named after a native chief. And that chief was the chief of the Duwamish people, who are not now recognized. So do with that as you will. In 2009, the Duwamish tribe opened the Duwamish Longhouse and Cultural Center. It is located at 4705 West Marginal Way, Southwest. There, they established the Duwamish Tribal Services as a nonprofit organization to provide social and cultural services to the Duwamish tribal community. So that's a lesson for today. If you want to read more about them, you can go to www.duwamishtribe.org and or to support them as we do modestly here by going to www.realrentduwamish.org.
Thank you, George. Beautiful. And finally, we make an offering to the Divine Feminine every Sunday morning, and at other times as well. And I've asked Isla to indulge us in a chant for the Divine Feminine. This is always one way we can kind of imbibe the music and the being of the Divine Feminine energy through Isla's beautiful music, and maybe you can tell us what chant you're going to sing and how it relates to the Divine Feminine.
Well, this may be a little radical to some, but this is a chant to not only Mother Mary, but Mary Magdalene as a co-equal with Yeshua from the ancient Essene tradition, acknowledging her as an equal master. So the Divine Feminine comes through Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, and the chant is very simple. Maria, Mariam, Mare, Mare meaning teacher, master.
Can I sing with you?
Yes, please do.
Hiding from me. So at this point, we're very excited to be introducing our guest speaker for today, who is celebrating. This is Sister Kathleen Pruitt. And before I let Jamal introduce her formally, I want to mention what she mentioned to me this morning. She's celebrating her 70th anniversary of her becoming a not, how do you say that? You had a formal way of saying it, of you entering the novitiate.
It's the 70th Jubilee year of my profession as a Sister of St. Joseph of Peace.
70th Jubilee year of her association with the Sisters. Oh my gosh.
And I'm older than that.
And I asked her, did her parents bring her when she was a baby to this? 70th year, I said, you personally, 70 years. She goes, yeah. I go, oh, you must have been a very small child when your parents. But she claims she was 19, so I'm not saying anything.
Oh.
But anyway, we're very honored and very joyous to welcome you, Sister Kathleen. And I'm going to have Jamal. Jamal knows Sister much better than I do, although I've had some beautiful times to listen to her speak, and Jamal has known her for more years.
Thank you so much, Sister Sally Jo. Well, what a unique joy and privilege to welcome Sister Kathleen Pruitt to Interfaith Community Sanctuary. And really, sincerely and simply, one of the kindest and humblest person I've ever met in my life. So, you know, you have her unique credentials in the brochure. But those who are online, let me read them. Read some of these impressive credentials. I'll use my third eye. I don't have my reading glasses. So she has served as a province leader, president of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, vice president of Pax Christi International. She has served as director of drug and alcohol programs for King County and Seattle Street Ministry. But you know what really splashes in my heart about Sister Kathleen is she truly embodies faith, courage, creativity, and tireless service, both locally and internationally. She travels all over the world, actually. And the last thing I will say is what really also resonates in my heart about Sister Kathleen is she's one of those trailblazers, of a very wonderful kind of congregant who embodies both and practices both Christianity and Buddhism, multiple belonging. Please give a wonderful hand to Sister Kathleen Pruitt.
Jamal, thank you very much, and Sally Jo for your invitation to come. And what a privilege it is for me to be here. And I truly, truly mean that. I see us as sisters and brothers in the faith, in a mystery that is beyond our understanding. And I'm going to read this because otherwise I tend to wander and I never say what I intend to say. So you're going to have to bear with me. My first acknowledgement as I begin sharing with you today is this. I'm speaking to you from the perspective of Christian follower of Jesus and as a Zen student and a Zen Buddhism student and teacher. And secondly, I know and believe deeply that we find similarities and comparative beliefs by looking through the teachings in the Torah of the Hebrew Jewish holy books, the teachings of Islam in the Quran, as also in the holy texts of many spiritual sects from the rich traditions of India and from the Native American indigenous people here in the US. And it seems to me that the many names for the mystery beyond our intellectual grasp speak and invite to fullness of life from similar profound messages. So not intending or desiring to be exclusive, I'm sharing what I know about engaged Buddhism through the eye of a Roman Catholic Zen Buddhist practitioner. You can put that together however you like. And a first question, was it possible that Jesus in his life as a carpenter craftsman and then as a spiritual itinerant teacher ever heard of the Buddha and his teachings? Capharnaum in Israel was a part of the trade routes from the east. As a craftsman, Jesus and Joseph no doubt worked in places other than their home villages, and for the years of his spiritual ministry, he was centered around and in Capharnaum. Even though there's no historical study that would confirm Jesus' encounter with Buddhist philosophy or practice, or that Jesus ever heard of the Buddha, the fact remains that there are striking commonalities in many of the teachings of these two spiritual masters. I don't pretend to be a scholar relative to this intriguing possibility. However, I do believe and know that it is possible for two people separated by time, culture, country, and distance can and do have similar, often parallel expressions, attitudes, and teachings. Suffice it to say that I believe that Jesus and the Buddha would have been curious inquirers and possibly, or most probably, very good friends. This reminds me of a cartoon that someone sent to me, probably a couple of years ago. It's a Buddha sitting on his cushion, hands in the mudra position, and saying to Jesus, "I wish the artist would get me off of this cushion and make me who I am." And Jesus has got his head on his hand and leaning his head. He says, "Yeah, I understand." He said, "For 2,000 years, they've made me a blonde-haired, blue-eyed dude." So I have a hunch they would be very, very good friends. Siddhartha Gautama was not always a Buddha, known as Buddha. It was his long years of austerities and meditative sitting, achieving what has been named enlightenment, yielded him the name Buddha, the enlightened one. Buddha's realization was essentially what came to be named as guiding practitioners to nirvana, a state of perfect peace, enlightenment, and freedom from the endless cycle of rebirth and suffering. The Buddha's teachings, and so the several expressions of Buddhism, there are actually three major schools of Buddhist practice: Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, with subgroups of each of the main schools. These hold some common beliefs. Buddhism neither posits nor denies a supernatural, supreme being or a God. Let me very quickly share some of those beliefs. The common belief in those various branches of Buddhism: impermanence, Everything is changing and nothing is permanent. Non-self. There's no permanent, unchanging soul or self. And suffering, which is clinging to impermanent things that cause suffering. I'm giving you just the definition. We can converse about what those mean if we choose to. In the three branches of Buddhism, the practitioner seeks enlightenment, not just for oneself, but for all. The chief meaning of those three permanent, or the impermanence, non-self, and suffering, is that we are not separate from each other. There's interbeing, we are one. I was thinking, George, as you mentioned the indigenous peoples, that Chief Seattle probably had this concept himself, because he essentially said, what you do to the earth, you do to yourself. We're not separate. As human beings, we're not separate from creation. That interbeing is a basic tenet of Buddhism. So that the seeking of enlightenment is a seeking of coming to know that and to be able to let go of the things in our lives that essentially cause us suffering and that keep us tethered. So enlightenment is not just for oneself, but it's to the fully enlightened Buddhist would be called what is a bodhisattva. And the bodhisattva is willing to forego his or her own nirvana, which is that state of perfect freedom from, for the sake of saving all beings. Another tenet is the karma and rebirth. The ultimate goal in Buddhism is liberation from suffering, greed, hatred, and ignorance. The three jewels, or the kind of the heart of the Buddhist practice, is the Buddha. And essentially, each of us is that Buddha. Each of us has that power. And I say in Christianity that each of us, whether we like it or not, want it or not, believe it or not, we are spark of the divine. We are more than our physical being. So the Buddha, or the fully enlightened one, is whatever religious practice we engage in, that sense of knowing not just here, but knowing that we are interrelated, that we are one, and we are one with however we understand that mystery beyond our belief. The second is the Dharma, and the Dharma is merely the teachings and the combination of, and really Buddhism is, in its teachings, rather complex, okay? But all of the gatherings. But Dharma is also, look at a tree. How many of us walk past trees and flowers and say, oh, nice. How about if you greet them as your brother or sister? That basically, that interrelationship is very real. And by realizing that, the Dharma is like a teaching or a belief. And the third jewel is community. That sense of being in this, not individually, but as a group. So the community is an extremely important part of Buddhist practice. The moral and ethical code for daily life. Non-violence toward everything. Active practice of non-violent responses in word and deed. No stealing, no sexual misconduct, no false speech, no taking of intoxicants that could cloud the mind. The precepts or moral guidelines: compassion, mindfulness, moral integrity, abstention from killing, sexual misconduct, false speech of any kind, or intoxicants as alcohol and other drugs. Now, it's a fairly short list of things we need to be aware of, and probably are. The essence of these beliefs are expressed simply in what is known as the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Simply stated, the Four Noble Truths are the truth of suffering. Suffering exists and is experienced in many ways. We all know that. The truth of the cause of suffering, something causes that. Death, physical limitation, anger, hatred, violence of any kind. So that those are the points of suffering that keep us bound. The truth of the end of suffering. There are ways to bring an end to the suffering that we experience. The truth of the path to the end of suffering. So while we know suffering, there's also a path to end that suffering. There is an end to suffering either in this life on earth or in the spiritual life of achieving nirvana. That sense when it all just sort of disappears. The Four Noble Truths are lived and given the life expression in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, and right hard. That's the daily teaching that people grasp. Jesus' teachings are grounded in the Mosaic Law, expressed in the Ten Commandments, and Jesus' one overarching commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Jesus, Son of God, sent by God, incarnate in the human person of Jesus, to show in word and action the unconditional love of the unseen God for all of humankind and for our earth, universe, and universe home as well. Every human person, the good, the not so good, the bad, and the ugly, is spark of the divine, temple of the Holy Spirit, loved into being by God, called by many names, love, infinite, absolute, ground of all being, source and sustainer of life, of all creation, Yahweh, Allah, Krishna. In the holy books of all of the most major religious traditions, one finds the essence of the same tenets of faith: love, love of neighbor and of the stranger, compassion, generosity, right living, reverence, and respect. So given that, and I acknowledge that's a very brief overview, and you begin to delve into the tenets of Buddhism, and it brings one to silence by the very fact that I can't understand them all. So what is meant by engaged Buddhism? Engaged Buddhism, or socially engaged Buddhism, is a modern movement actually promulgated in the 1960s by Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Theravada Buddhist, and one who, like many of his co-practitioners, very, very interested in both interfaith dimension as well as his commitment during, because it was really during the Vietnamese War, when he essentially aroused in the Buddhist community there the fact that it isn't enough to sit on the cushion. One must essentially put one's life on the line, really. And I think we all can conjure up and remember the young Buddhist monk who set himself afire and essentially gave his life as testimony to the insanity of war. You know, take a look and realize, engaged Buddhism. His understanding applies Buddhist principles, mindfulness, compassion directly to contemporary social, political, economic, and environmental issues. Simply, engaged Buddhism shifts the focus from individual enlightenment to collective compassion, healing, and social justice. Interbeing is a central concept in Buddhism, rooted in the belief that nothing exists independently. We are not separate from, but rather suffering of one is the suffering of all. Deeply interconnected social action and concern for the good of the whole is a necessary and natural extension and fulfillment of one's personal spiritual practice. It's not enough for the Buddhist or Zen Buddhist. Zen Buddhism is really a sub-school, mostly within the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism. It is not enough for the Zen Buddhist to sit on the cushion meditating night and day, seeking personal enlightenment for oneself alone. Since no one is really separate from another, what we do to or for another, we do also to ourselves. There's a simple statement in Zen Buddhist practice that says, if you cannot take the cushion to the kitchen, why are you sitting on the cushion at all? Translate kitchen into the experiences of daily life. Change the word kitchen to streets, to peaceful protests, to those neighbors, strangers, foreigners in need of compassion, care of any kind, you name it. Something like the words of the prophet Micah in the Hebrew scripture. This only I ask, that you act justly, love tenderly, and walk humbly with God. In Zen practice, there are 4 vows chanted several times daily, and they state simply the intent of the long hours of meditative practice. Beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Delusion is inexhaustible. I vow to cut it off. The Dharma gates are limitless. I vow to learn them all. Enlightenment is inexhaustible. I vow to realize it fully. Thus, an intense practice of meditation opens to the way of the bodhisattva. A bodhisattva is any person on the path to becoming fully enlightened or becoming what is known as a Buddha. Driven by deep compassion, they vow to delay their own final escape from suffering or nirvana, so they can stay in the world and help other beings achieve fullness of life and spiritual awakening. I am a Zen practitioner and a teacher, also a Roman Catholic sister, Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace. I can quite honestly say that the teachings of Jesus and of Christianity call us to be engaged Christians. Engaged Christians, just as the call to be engaged Buddhists. And I want to say, I think that's the call of each of the major faiths, is to be engaged in the tenets of that faith, which, Thich Nhat Hanh was a great believer in interfaith dialogue. So is the Dalai Lama, and I'll mention that later. That being that engaged, whatever, to the tenets of one's faith shifts the focus from individual holiness to collective compassion, healing, and social justice. Jesus says to each human person, I am one with my Father, Abba, God. You, each of you, is one in me, interbeing. I and you, you and me, we are one within each other, not separate. The one commandment given us by Jesus is simple and perhaps simply difficult to grasp. Love one another, all others, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as I love you. Simply put, love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself. We are not set apart from one another, and it is not enough to profess love. Love must be active. If I cannot take my prayer in church out into the kitchen of the world around me, why am I praying at all? Going back to the beginning of this brief, and I underline brief, presentation, engaged Buddhism is an expression of the intent of the whole of Buddhist practice. As engaged Christianity or engaged any other faith, an expression of the whole of that practice. I dare to say it is the intent in the sacred teachings of Judaism, Islam, Hinduism as well. The Dalai Lama, spiritual teacher of Tibetan Buddhism, is one of the world's most prominent advocates for interfaith dialogue and religious harmony. He frequently engages in discussions with Christian, Muslim, Jewish, and Hindu leaders, emphasizing that despite philosophical differences, all major religions share the same core values of love, compassion, forgiveness. Isn't this what you are here engaged in yourselves as you come these Sunday mornings to share interfaith, right, the interfaith experience? You come together in prayer and conversation and community, finding strength in celebration of shared vision and values, reverencing the differences and holding to the reality that God, called by many names. You know, I'm a mountain climber. I've climbed Rainier, I've climbed St. Helens, I've climbed Baker, and there are many, many, many pathways to the top of that mountain. Some more dangerous than others, but there are many pathways. And I see that the same in our relationship with this infinite mystery we cannot grasp intellectually. Many, many pathways to the same infinite mystery that we are all a part of. So, reverencing the differences and holding to the reality that God, called by many names, has but one infinite desire and longing, and that is for the peace, love, wholeness of the human community, and recognition of the shared richness and wonder of all creation. With that, I would just open to observations, questions, and say thank you for listening to give you a short, and I underline short, introduction to the principles of Buddhism, and I'm sure many of you are far more intimately knowing of those than I. But simply put, if you sit on the cushion or you sit in the pew and you take it nowhere else except to go home and feel good that somehow you have given thanks for the day, it's not enough. That somehow it calls us. And I don't know your political persuasion, and it doesn't matter to me. I only know that I need to be really, 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 really careful, because wherever the great beyond is, I'm probably going to be sitting between Trump and Putin. And so how can I address the evil of actions that I see without condemning the person? And that to me is a huge challenge, both an invitation, a shove, and a challenge. But I truly believe that. I think that Do I believe in the fire of hell? No, I don't. Do I believe in the infinite compassion of a mystery that I don't understand? Yes, I do. And do I believe that, what I believe is that and this is my little fanciful, whatever I want to call it, that God said to God's son one day, he said, you know, I'm up here and people think about me, but they don't really know. Because if you're like me, at least in my early catechism days, you know, God was the check master, sitting, looking to be sure that he was checking off all the sins. Well, I think that's a hoax. I don't believe that. I believe God is this infinite mystery of intimate expressed love, and desires in that we all know that. So he said, what I want you to do, Jesus, is go down there and show them who I am. Show them who I am. I do not believe that God sent Jesus to die to make God happy again. That essentially God is eternal happiness, joy, graciousness, and we have put him in, or her, or it in a box that says, God, I gotta be good, or not only am I gonna go to the woodshed, I'm not even gonna make it there. And I don't know how many of you experienced that, but I know I did. And I said, this does not fit. So I believe God sent God's Son, and God sent spiritual masters in many of those faiths to say, look, I'm infinite love, I am infinite care, I am about those at the margins. Jesus got himself into trouble because what he challenged was what he saw as unjust or incongruous with the infinite love of God among his religious and political leaders, and named it and took the blame. And essentially that died and was willing to give his life. If you go to the agony in the garden, it wasn't quite as willing as we'd like to think. There was a struggle, and I think that Jesus essentially said, I really don't want to die, but if this is the only way, okay, sorta. And there was that human struggle of saying, can I really live what I preach? And was willing to undergo death in order to say to us, no matter who you are, no matter how far you are from the edge of whatever, you are infinitely, totally loved. So, see you all in heaven. Wherever that is. There you have it, folks. Am I a happy Zen practitioner? Yes, I am.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sister Catherine. I know we have questions or comments or thoughts or feelings that have arisen. So let's take some time to explore that. And Sister's been very gracious with opening up all kinds of little doors for us. So who would like to begin?
First of all, thank you. I'm still processing, but I did have some thoughts, or maybe feelings is a better description. No, it's probably thoughts. But these are thoughts that I have to ponder all the time, because it is an issue for me to hopefully resolve these issues. And what I'm talking about are the issues of polarities. When you're dealing with, we can use any example, but you gave us two good examples right there, Trump and Putin, and maybe polarities in a different way. But addressing that, understanding that, assessing that, the mental side at least, so that maybe emotionally I can sort of assimilate it and process it. Do you go through that exercise as in your Buddhist practices?
I would say not, you don't, posit that, but essentially, yes, it's that sense of how do I come to the point of being able to look at what a person or persons do, and really, let me see if I can bring this down. One of my social work experiences when I was going through the School of Social Work, and I was working for King County. I was called the county drug pusher because I was in charge of drug and alcohol services. But following that, I worked at one of the experiential pieces of that was to work at the Monroe Reformatory. So I was social worker for the reformatory for a couple of years, and then invited after that to be chaplain to stay on, which I did. But during the time I was working there, I was working with a young man who was seriously involved in criminal activity. And I wanted to do some consulting. So I went up to the resident psychologist to just see if I could talk this through. And the first thing he said to me when I walked into the room was, "The men in here are evil." And I said, "What?" I said, "No, they're not. They are not evil. They have done evil things, but they are not evil. That they are people like you and like me who have, yes, gone astray for whatever reason, and the actions need addressing, but to call them evil, how about yourself?" I turned around and walked out and said, "I'm not asking this guy for guidance." Never did go back to him, but I figured I can figure this out better myself.
Thank you. Fellow hiker like yourself.
Yeah. Anyone?
Sister Kathleen, you profess to embrace both Christianity and Buddhism. Has this caused any problems with your superiors?
No,
Wow.
none that I know of anyway.
They're afraid to tell you.
Thank you.
No, actually, one of our sisters on the East Coast is also a Zen master. And one who died recently was also a Zen teacher. So, yeah. And I find no, it's been good for me.
That's wonderful. No conflict. So people accept you, or people in all of your religious circles or spiritual communities accept your diversity of practice,
Yeah.
and they don't challenge that as being,
They may look at me strangely periodically, but
they look at you strangely. Well, that's okay. Right? I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about Dharma. That's one of the concepts of Buddhism that puzzles me a lot, or that I don't have I don't even know if there's an English word for it. But I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what that means to you. What is the Dharma?
okay, the Dharma actually is not only the compilation of the teachings of the Buddha and the interpretation of those through the various gurus of each of the various pathways of Buddhism. And they are complex, and they are philosophically challenging and intellectually challenging. But to really pierce those and get down to the groundwork, the Dharma is like a doorway. It's like you take a book and you read it and you learn something. And I think in Zen practice, the Dharma would be, as I indicated, the world around us. What do we learn from? If you're looking at this in terms of saying, how do you let go of suffering? How do you let go of, how do you become the Buddha? Is really to read the situations around us and to grasp that underneath what we see as the evil of war, the evil of killing, the evil of whatever that is, that there is something to learn and to ponder and to let go of. So the Dharma is the teaching, the official teachings of, and each of the sects of Buddhism will have their own. Mahayana is called the middle way. And there are unique expressions within each of those, but the Dharma is what draws us to say, these two teach us something. And what is it that we want to learn? And how do we let go of the suffering caused by our inability to see the interbeing, our inability to see that we are not separate from each other, that what we do to one another, we do to ourselves. And I think that Chief Seattle had it, simply put, what you do to the earth, you do to yourself. So, and I think we all can contest or attest to the fact that that's true. I mean, we pollute the water, we do all these crazy things that throw stuff into the air that you don't want to breathe.
So I've heard it described somehow as a way of life.
It is a way of life.
So it's kind of like taking those teachings and finding out how to live that
That's
every
right.
day and every situation kind of thing.
That's right.
But it's based on the teachings and the wisdom that we've been given by these various teachers. And then it's like, how do I apply that? And that's why you have to get off the mat, right?
right.
Because on the mat, you're not really living out there. You're sitting and you're learning, you're reading your books. But when you get off the mat, that's when the Dharma comes in, kind of.
And also that off the mat, whether you're doing dishes or in a protest, what are you there for?
What's the deeper?
That's right. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. That's helpful.
Thank you so much for your teaching this morning. I really like to see the compare and contrast between the two traditions. So I'll see if I can articulate my question. There is this tenet in Buddhism about, or maybe it's a promise, about birth and rebirth and ending that cycle. And I guess my question is that literally? Or are we talking more about ending the cycle of suffering?
Ending the cycle of suffering. Yeah. So, I think that there is a sense that the rebirth is, okay, you've gone through all this, you didn't get it right, go back and try again. Okay. And does that mean actual rebirth? I want to say yes and no. But and there's a lot of yes and no in Buddhism, I'll tell you that. That it is, you got to get it right, and getting it right, and that's why the explicit kind of, same as the Ten Commandments, live within that framework and live what the underlying piece of that is, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Do we really be compassionate to the stranger? What's happening with our immigration policies? Do we get it right? And so it's sort of like the rebirth is go back and try again, keep figuring out that what you do to you, you do to the other. What the other does to you. We are not separate. So it's not easily explainable, but do they mean physical rebirth? I don't think that's what is intended there, although it's talked about, the rebirth. You're not going to be totally free until you can let go and you can essentially live in right relationship. You know, when we talk about justice, justice is right relationship. What is right relationship? That all of us participate in the wealth and the goodness and the graciousness that this universe was meant to be for us. I don't know if that explains. It's a concept that is hard to grasp.
Yeah, that was great. What hit me was cutting through that cycle of delusion and attachment.
Right.
Yeah.
Delusion is inexhaustible. We cut it off. Inexhaustible.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Whoa. Thank you. Got feedback here for some reason. Thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us. I have about a dozen questions, but I'm gonna stick with one. And that is, I'm a longtime student of Meister Eckhart, and the way we've been talking, one of my favorite phrases that Meister Eckhart has is what we sow in contemplation, we reap in service to others. That's one translation. Say that again. What we sow in contemplation, we reap in service to others. It's a quote from Meister Eckhart. And so my question to you is, having the experience you have as a nun, and then the experience you have as a Zen Buddhist, how has your sense of contemplation changed? Have you found yourself more involved in one, like the Christian tradition, or in meditation the way Zen Buddhist tradition, or is there some amalgam? Is something that you've created on your own as a result of having both experiences?
That is a good question. How do I want to do this? Maybe I can do this. There is a koan. The practice Zen, the Zen practice that I follow is from the Mahayana tradition. Okay, and let me see if I can put this in order. There's Rinzai Zen, which is part of there's a Soto Zen and a Rinzai Zen. Rinzai Zen works with a set of koans, and I think there are 600 of them. Okay, 600 nonsense. I mean, there's one particular one, and I was sharing this with Sally Jo earlier, that the koan was, what is your original face before your parents were born? Okay, and then you take that, and you're supposed to be able to demonstrate that you understand or that you grasp the essence of that koan. So, 4 days, 8 hours a day, with the possibility of visiting the teacher maybe twice or 3 times a day. I had that koan sitting in the back of my head. And I'd go in and I'd start my theological description of what I thought this meant, and the bell would ring and I'd be out on my ear. You don't get a chance to say, give me a second chance. So 4 days, 8 hours. Finally, I went in, I got down on my knees and I burst into tears and said, I don't know. And she looked at me and she said, well, isn't that great? Well, my first impulse was to reach across the cushion and whack her and say, why didn't you tell me that? And I think I did more gently say, why didn't you tell me that? She said, because you had to experience the experience of not knowing. At that moment, every image that I ever had of God, whatever those images were, went poof. Did my faith go away? No. But the images that I described God by, whether it's the man sitting in the white with a big throne on a big throne with a crown on, disappeared. And it's sort of like having candy taken out of your hand, and you say, now what do I have left? And so that sense of the reality of that infinite mystery that I now know I'm not going to intellectually be able to describe still exists, is real, and is tangible, but isn't the false image of. And I think what religion does, if we're not careful, is give us these images as if that were the truth of something that in fact eludes intellectual dissection. How do we believe? How do we really believe that interbeing exists? How do we really believe that there is a place, call it nirvana, call it heaven, call it whatever you like, where that, let me give you another example. I got a call from my brother who lives in Mexico now. He spent most of his working life in the Eskimo villages on the fishing grounds in the villages of northern Alaska. So when they retired, his wife said, I want to go somewhere warm. So they went to Mexico, but okay. So he calls me periodically, and I get this call. No hello, no hi, no how are you. Where do we go after we die? Well, I'm sitting on the other end of the phone saying, how do I answer this? Long pause. And he said, well, we're made of energy, and you can't kill energy. I thought, it's a good start. Another long pause, no conversation, another long pause, and he said, energy's made up of atoms. Atoms, we go back to the universe. And I said, that's a great beginning. No goodbye, clunk. So I sat there thinking, what just happened? But I think that sense of that I can explain all of those things in my limited mental capacity. And so what is faith? What is belief? What is hope? And it's true. I mean, and Meister Eckhart, by the way, is one of my very, very favorite people in all the world. And he is, in the Christian mystics, the closest to Buddhism that we have, because what he really says is that sense of you are not separate. You're not separate from that ground of all being. You're not separate. And you're going to be restless until you come to realize that while you are not God, you are not other than God either. So Eckhart, Julian of Norwich, Hildegard of Bingen, the mystics got it in spades. So how do we become mystics? And that's a long, drawn-out way to answer your question, but I don't think, and that's why for me, that infinite mystery that I name God is no longer sitting on a cloud. It is a mystery I can't explain intellectually, but that I know. And I know that I know. Mechthild of Magdeburg is another one of those close people. She says, the day of my spiritual awakening was when I saw and knew that I saw God in all things and all things in God. And that included caterpillars and flowers and trees and people, that I saw and knew that I saw God in all things and all things in God. interbeing, that mystery, the ground of all being for me is as expressive of what I believe God is that ground of all being, constantly recreating, constantly renewing. And so has my image of God changed? Yes. Do I worry about whether it's an image I can touch and feel? Not really.
Thank you. I don't really know how to word my question. And maybe I have had this belief that's not correct, but I've always thought that in Buddhism there was this non-attachment, to create a non-attachment with, I guess, your ego, maybe. I wonder if you could speak on attachment, letting go, involving compassion. It's kind of broad. I know, it's a broad question, but it's the very specific thing that I seem to struggle with.
Yeah, and I think we all struggle with those, because there are really two selves in us. There's the little self. You know, when somebody says, "Who are you? Who are you?" Or "What are you?" And we say, "Well, I was a teacher, I'm a social worker, I'm a sister of St. Joseph of Peace, I have a degree in this, I have a degree in that." And I begin to describe myself by those kinds of words. And then you've got the true self. So the little false self is going to die when you die. It's going to go away. So is that your real self? Where is your real self? That real self is coming to know, or coming to sense, and then to intellectually let yourself know that spark of the divine, that spark of the infinite mystery is who we really are. Eckhart says we will be restless until we come to know that we are who we have always been. So how do we, I do a lot of work with our healthcare system, mid-level leaders. And that's how I start every presentation, is you. Every single one of you is spark of the divine, whether you want it or not, believe it or not, or understand it. You can't get away from the fact that you are something much more than how you describe yourself. We get attached to that little self, and when you get quiet enough to go down below that little self, the little self is sort of like that beggar child who grabs your coats and says, "No, no, 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 I'm here and you gotta recognize me." How do we sense and say, okay, but I hold that description lightly, okay? This is who you see me as, but who I really am is something much more. And can I tell you in absolute terms what that is? No, except you are spark of the divine. It's like Rilke's poem, where he says, God speaks to each of us as God makes us, and then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words we dimly hear. You, called out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing, embody me. Make big shadows that I can walk in. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror, for no feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose. There's a country out there called life. You'll know it by its seriousness. Give me your hand. Don't let yourself lose me. And I think that's the journey into realizing that there's something more in us than what we do or how we describe ourselves. And that's maybe a philosophical answer to a question that I'm trying to answer.
That's good. Thank you.
I like people, and I'm curious about people. And I find you to be rare company. So my questions are, what's the hardest lesson you've ever learned in your life? And is there something still vexing you that you're working on?
Am I where I want to be? No. When you said that, it takes me back to an experience in the 3rd grade. Okay. And I had my mother as a teacher in the 3rd grade. Okay. We were living in Marble Mount, Washington, way up in the hills. And I stole peanuts off of a desk. Okay. And the little kid from whom I stole it put up all sorts of kind of woohoos. Somebody stole my peanuts. So my mother took a look at me, and I had peanut salt all over my face. And she said, "Did you steal those peanuts?" "No." "Are you sure you didn't steal those peanuts?" "No, I did not steal those peanuts." She said, pulled out a chair and sat me in front of the class and said, "Sit there until you can tell me whether or not you stole those peanuts." I have never forgotten that, and I want to say that was an embarrassing way to learn a first lesson, that truth is easier than lie. Simple, but I learned. No, and you know, it's, I think you learn by doing whatever you're doing and then having somebody say to you, "Really?" "Oh, yes, I can do that." I'm not trying to evade. I think the lesson of how easy it is to kind of rely on false premises without going into, and that's why I think meditation and contemplative practice, however you describe that, is really, really, really important. Because if you exercise that and train yourself to get down below the rumble of the river on top and get into that very, very, very silent place, that you begin to learn differently what matters and what doesn't. And how easy it is to slip into telling lies, to whether little white lies or big bad lies. A lie is a lie, and it is a violation of the truth. So, you know, the 10 Commandments, the precepts of Buddhism really align. No lying, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no. All of those things are things that come to us in one way or another. We make our choice. You know, do we operate out of who we really are, or do we operate out of protection of a visible self?
Just one follow-up. Would you say life is a succession of ever being on the precipice of a choice? Every interaction is the practice.
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, and I'll confess, I've practically stopped watching the news because I can feel the anger rise in me in a heartbeat. And I want to say, okay, what good is the anger doing? How do I dispel that and say, okay, look through the action, but don't forget to condemn the action, because it is evil. What we are doing to immigrant people in this country is evil and needs to be challenged and needs to be changed. Do I challenge that out of my hatred of the person who put the policy in place? Or do I condemn the action and say we need to change this, and say, yes, Mr. Trump, hopefully there's a wood heaven or a woodshed in heaven. And can I get away from the woodshed and say, what am I going to say to him? So I think it is that lifelong struggle of catching oneself when anger is misplaced and you begin to call him names that you wouldn't call anybody else. How do you do that? And, we each have to find the answer to that.
Well, this has been very beautiful and uplifting and deepening for us all, Sister Kathleen, and we're very grateful for you for your sharing. I think we'll get through some of our business here. We have people online still with us, and then we'll have some music and closing our blessings. We have a time in our service where we share our wealth with the community so that we can keep working forward on our preservation of our historic building and our wonderful programs that happen here. And we know the folks online are sharing their wealth through the website. There's a QR code in the program if you'd prefer to do it online. Here you can also, with your phone, you can get to the website. And we are deeply appreciative for whatever comes our way. And we have many upcoming gatherings that happen. We're all welcome downstairs. There's coffee and tea and snacks if you want to come back and come down, and maybe Kathleen will give us a little more of her time if we have unanswered questions. I know we all have been very inspired with a lot of questions and ideas and thoughts that have come up this morning, and we can continue to share downstairs. We have classes, we have workshops, we have many different opportunities throughout the week, throughout each day, throughout the week, and throughout the month. Next Sunday, we have our first Sunday welcome. We have our typical welcome the guest Sunday, and Terry Hershey is coming back from, he's a wonderful minister, and he's actually, I think he's a Buddhist practitioner too. From his writings, you can tell he practices a lot of mindfulness and Buddhist practices, and well known in the area for his workshops. He was here last year, and I had several people asking us if we could get him back, and so he'll be coming. He used to live on Vashon Island. I think he doesn't live on the island anymore, but he'll be here next Sunday. And we have, of course, as I said, we have our meditation group, which meets on Thursday evening, the sitting in silence, and we can sit in silence whatever method works for us. We get to be on the cushion together for a while, and being in community in a Sangha, I'm sure that Sister Kathleen would also tell us that that's a very productive process as well. And we have book groups and study groups. Check out our website, and every Monday you can sign up to get a list of our upcoming gatherings for that week. And Jamal has a workshop coming up. Why don't you tell us about that, Jamal, and then we'll share.
George?
So very briefly, a workshop on June 20th, which is a Saturday, 9:30 to, beg your pardon? Oh, it's still on? Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought it was off, okay. Yeah. So this wonderful workshop on June 20th, which is Saturday, 9:30 to 1:30, where we'll be weaving in spiritual insights with sacred chants, dances of universal peace, and meditation right here. And Gina Salah will be there doing the vocal global chants. Elizabeth will be here. She's the international leader of Dances of Universal Peace, and I'll also be participating in that. Sliding scale, $1.55 to $1.95. Anything you can you can share. So please come and join us on June 20th, which is a Saturday. Thank you.
Okay, were there any other important next Sunday will also be our guiding council meeting after the Sunday service. That's our monthly meeting when we talk about the general business of the church and the sanctuary, and that comes every first Sunday at 11:45. So that will be happening next Sunday, and then I think that's probably it for our most urgent upcoming gatherings. And we'll say goodbye to the folks online, but maybe we'll do our music, and they can stay and listen to us if they want to listen to the music, and then I'm sure they'll enjoy that, and then we'll go into our closing blessing.
Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Shankara Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Shankara Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Umaramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Umaramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Shankara Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Shankara Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Umaramana Shiva Shankara Jaya Jaya Umaramana Shiva Shankara Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Radharamana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya Shankara Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Shankara Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya Umaramana Shiva Shankara 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 Jaya Jaya
Thank you so much, Ayla, for wrapping that up for us. We'll ring our bell and say goodbye to our friends online who have been with us at a distance there. We appreciate that presence. And we'll have a few minutes for sharing our hearts here with any personal prayers that I don't want to skip this today because I have a very dear friend who just lost her brother yesterday. And I'd like to ask for prayers for Geraldine, who's been here to visit us before. A few months ago, she was here.